We often talk about the past in broad terms, but everything becomes clearer when you look at it through the fate of one family. Make yourselves comfortable. This forgotten story is sure to leave you unmoved. We begin. The first time Samuel cut his own flesh, he did it with a hand that had never shaken before. The blade was small, nothing more than a whittling knife borrowed from the carpentry shed. But in his grip, it felt like a verdict. Night pressed close around the slave quarters, thick and damp, humming with crickets and the muffled breathing of people too tired to dream. The big house on the hill was a dark shape against the sky, its windows blank, like eyes turned away. "Hold still," Samuel whispered. His daughter's hand was so small in his own that for a heartbeat, he almost couldn't see where to place the edge. Ruth was 14, but in his mind she was still the baby he had once held in one arm while plowing with the other. Her palm trembled. "Papa, I'm not afraid," she lied. He heard the quiver in her voice anyway. She was brave, his girl, braver than he deserved. Samuel drew a slow breath, steadying himself. He had steadied other men through lashings and fever, Calhoun through his rages, horses through fits of panic. He had stood like a stone when his own back was opened for someone else's mistake. But this thin hand and this tiny blade, made his chest feel split, hollow. "This ain't to hurt you," he said, more to himself than to her. "This to find you, wherever the world throws you." He pressed the knife just below the base of her thumb, on the soft slope of the right palm. Not deep, not enough to scar crooked, just enough. Ruth hissed through her teeth as a thin line of blood welled and curved like a small red moon. "There," he murmured, almost a prayer. "That's us." He leaned down and kissed the inside of her wrist, his lips brushing the warm, metallic taste of her blood. For a second he closed his eyes and tried, like a madman, to pull her pain into himself through that contact, to drag it out of her skin and bury it in his own chest. "If you ever lost," he said, his voice low and rough, "if the world tries to swallow you whole, you look at this mark. You remember your people. You remember your name. You hear me, Ruth?" She nodded, tears bright in her eyes. What if you the one who's lost, Papa?" she whispered. "How I find you?" He did not answer. Instead, he reached for their son. Isaiah was 16, already taller than Samuel, but when he sat on the edge of the pallet and offered his hand, he was suddenly 10 again, all knees and elbows and trust, calloused from the fields, ink-stained at the tips from the secret evenings spent tracing letters in the dirt. His right hand looked almost like a man's. Almost. "You sure about this?" Isaiah asked quietly. "This your idea of a family mark, huh?" Samuel forced the corner of his mouth to twitch upward. "You always saying you want to be like the white folks reading their books. Well, they got family crests, don't they? We got what we can carry." He placed the blade on Isaiah's palm, in the same place, same curve. His son did not flinch. The cut opened, neat and obedient. A second crescent of blood. "That's you," Samuel murmured. "That's me and you, your mama, your sister, all of us." When he finished, he turned the knife on himself without hesitation. His own right hand was a map of scars already. Pale ridges from rope burns. Rough knots from old breaks. He had been a plow hand, a stable boy, a field hand, a carpenter when Calhoun discovered he could be trusted with tools. Every job left its own signature. He pressed the blade where their blood had spilled, carving the same curve into his own skin. The sting cut through the numbness that had been pressing on him all day, through the weight that had sat on his shoulders since the man from town had slipped him a folded scrap of paper behind the feed store. Tomorrow night, 1 wagon, you and 1. It was written in a careful, educated hand. The hand of a man who had said words Samuel had never expected to hear from a white mouth. "I ain't the only one on this road. There's others. We get folks north. Quiet. Underground," the man had called it, with a strange half-smile. Like a railroad without tracks. Like a promise whispered instead of nailed in iron. You and one. He had repeated it again and again, as if clarity could make the cruelty less. "Now you, girl," Samuel said hoarsely. He reached for the last of them. Mary watched him with eyes that had seen too much already. His wife did not ask questions when she knew there were none that could be answered clean. She simply turned her right hand up, fingers spread, the way she had done on their wedding night, when he'd traced the lines of her palm and promised, "Whatever they do, they don't break this." He cut her slowly, reverently. When the blood came, he kissed her palm as he had kissed their children's, longer this time, letting his forehead rest against her hand. "We all marked," Mary whispered, "on the same place, on the right." "On the right," Samuel echoed. Outside, a dog barked once, sharp and distant. Somewhere closer, a chain clinked, metal against wood. The quarters shifted in their sleep. Isaiah flexed his hand, watching the blood gather, then rub it onto his trousers. "Nobody gonna see this," he said. "Not if I close my fist." "That's the point," Samuel answered. "This ain't for them to see. This for us, for later." "What later?" Ruth asked. "You keep saying later like it's something real." He opened his mouth, then closed it again. How could he tell them that later was a road he had never walked, a north he had never seen, a word he'd only heard in whispers when the overseer was too drunk to come down from the big house? Canada, some said, the name soft and far away. Free states, others murmured, like it was a church you could walk into and never be whipped again. He had no map, only a stranger's scrap of paper and a promise. One wagon, one conductor, one chance. You and one. "Later," he said finally, "is when this place ain't the last word on who you are." Mary's thumb brushed the back of his neck, a tiny grounding touch. "We should sleep," she murmured. "You got work before dawn. Else Calhoun start asking questions about why his best man moving slow." Her voice held a bitter edge on the word best. Calhoun liked to say it, "my best man," when visitors came, slapping Samuel on the back, showing off the neat stalls and mended wagons. A good investment, he'd grin. This one worth two of the others. Smart enough, too, for a Negro. Smart enough. Smart enough to listen in silence when the men from town talked about new patrols on the roads, harsher laws, rewards for catching runaways. Smart enough to know that every new fence, every new paper nailed to the courthouse door, narrowed the crack in the wall by which a life might slip through. Smart enough to know that when a man like Wainwright, the storekeep, leaned close one afternoon with his eyes sharp and nervous and said, "You still got that boy that reads, 16 tall, you trust him?" Nothing that followed would be simple. Samuel lay down, but sleep did not come. Ruth curled at Mary's side, her newly marked hand tucked under her cheek. Isaiah lay on his back, staring at the rafters, lips moving silently as if he were reciting something he'd read long ago. Samuel watched them in the thin wash of moonlight slipping through the cracks in the wall. The cuts on their hands had stopped bleeding. Dark crescents now, already drying. When he finally drifted under, it was not into rest, but into a tight, airless dream. In the dream, there was a wagon with a false bottom and a white man with nervous eyes. There was a narrow road between black trees. There were dogs somewhere behind them, baying. The wagon shook. Hay brushed his face. His right hand burned where the mark lay, as if it knew something his mind refused to name. You and one. In the dream, Ruth reached for him and Isaiah reached for him, and their hands were the same size in the dark. He woke before dawn with his heart pounding and his shirt damp against his skin. The air was cold on his face. Mary's hand still rested on his chest, her fingers curled in the rough fabric. Beside them, Isaiah was already awake, sitting quietly, his marked hand pressed against his knees, as if he too had been listening to some silent verdict all night. "They say it's still on for tomorrow," he asked softly, not looking up. Samuel stared at him, at the boy who would be a man in a year, at the curve of his cheek that was still more child than adult. The question hung there between them like the last step before a drop. "Yes," Samuel said at last. His voice sounded old to his own ears. "It's on." Isaiah nodded once. No smile, no relief. Just a tightening in his jaw, the way Samuel himself did when he lifted something heavier than it looked. Ruth stirred, blinking. "Why you whispering?" she mumbled. "Sun ain't even up." Samuel looked at his daughter, at the way she rubbed sleep from her eyes with the back of her left hand, careful not to touch the sting in the right, at the line of her mouth, so like Mary's when she was trying not to cry. "Because," he thought, "I am choosing which of my children the world gets to keep." Out loud, he said only, "Go back to sleep, baby girl. Long day." He got up, ducked through the low door into the dawn that was just beginning to bleed into the sky. The air smelled of wet earth and wood smoke, of the faint sourness of the stables downhill. From the big house, a thin plume of kitchen smoke was already rising. The plantation woke in layers. First the birds, then the kitchen, then the quarters, then the overseer's whistle, shredding the fragile quiet. Samuel walked toward the barns on automatic, his body knowing the way as surely as his hands knew the weight of a hammer or the curve of a horse's muzzle. But today, each familiar thing felt edged, outlined in a sharpness that made his throat ache. The fence he had mended last month, its rails straight and strong, the wagon wheels he had repaired, spokes oiled and true, the harness leather he had rubbed until it shone, all of it built to keep this place running, to carry cotton bales to the gin and guests to Sunday dinners and Calhoun's children to town. Tomorrow, if the stranger's promise held, one wagon would carry something else. A man and one child, hidden under rotting hay and old tarps, clattering toward a road whose end Samuel had never seen. He knew the tracks of this land better than his own face. He could walk from the quarters to the river in the dark. He knew which dip in the road gathered water after rain, which stand of trees hid good kindling, which patch of brush sometimes sheltered copperheads. But beyond the line of the pines, beyond the last field, the land blurred. Stories only, hearsay. "You look like a man at a hanging," a voice drawled behind him. Samuel turned. Mr. Calhoun stood by the barn door in his linen shirt, hair still mussed from sleep, a cup of coffee steaming in one hand. Tall, with the comfortable heaviness of a man who had never missed a meal, he smiled like they shared some private joke. "Just thinking about the south field, sir," Samuel said, head dipping automatically. "Ground going hard, might need to turn it sooner this year." Calhoun chuckled. "Always worrying ahead, ain't you, Sam? That's why I like you better than the rest. You think." He took a sip, then frowned at Samuel's right hand. "You hurt yourself." Samuel glanced down. He'd wrapped the new cut in a strip of cloth before leaving the cabin, but a faint blotch of red had already bled through. "Whittling last night," he said smoothly. "Took a splinter wrong." Calhoun snorted. "Whittling? Ain't you getting fancy, long as you ain't carving yourself a set of wings?" He laughed at his own joke, clapped Samuel on the shoulder a little too hard, and sauntered off toward the house, shouting for the overseer. Samuel watched him go, the easy swing of his walk,
the way the morning light turned his shirt almost golden. He thought, not for the first time, that a man might go mad from the simple, brutal way the world chose, who woke up owning land, and who woke up owned by it. He flexed his bandaged hand. The sting grounded him. On the other side of the barn, in the shadow where the smell of hay and horse hung thick, a different man waited. Wainwright had left his store clothes in town. Here, by the back path, he looked almost like any other poor white farmer. Worn boots, patched trousers, hat pulled low. But his eyes were bright and anxious. "You sure you want to do this, Sam?" he hissed as soon as Samuel stepped into the shade. "Last chance to turn back. Nobody blame you. Road's bad, patrol's thick. They catch you. They don't just whip you this time, not with that new law." Samuel held his gaze. "You said tomorrow night," he said. "You said one wagon. You said you know the way." "I know the first part of the way." Wainwright shifted from foot to foot. "There's others after. Folks what call themselves conductors, like on a train. I ain't asked their real names. Don't you neither. Safer that way. Underground," Samuel said quietly. The word felt strange in his mouth. Heavy. "Yeah," Wainwright muttered. "Like it don't exist. Like we all ghosts if they catch us." He scrubbed a hand over his jaw, then looked up again. "You remember what I told you? You and one. That wagon ain't big. False Bottom barely holds 2 grown bodies when it's empty. And it ain't empty. We gotta load some sacks on top or it look wrong. I try to take more. We all hang. That's God's truth." Samuel nodded slowly. "One," he repeated. "Which one you taking?" Wainwright asked before he could stop himself. "The boy, right? The one what reads?" Samuel's throat worked. He heard somewhere behind him in the yard the distant sound of Ruth's laughter as she fetched water. Isaiah's deeper murmur as he talked with the other field hands. The world went thin and sharp around the edges again. "Tomorrow night," Samuel said. "You meet us by the old sycamore past the river. You knock 3 times on the wagon side. I'll be there." Wainwright opened his mouth, then closed it. For a heartbeat, something like pity flickered in his eyes. "You a better man than most," he said roughly. "I seen fathers sell their kids for less than what you about to risk. You could stay. Live out your years right here. Calhoun like you. You his best hand." Samuel thought of Calhoun's coffee. His hand on Samuel's shoulder, his easy laugh. "Maybe that's the problem," he said. He turned away before Wainwright could answer, before the storekeep could say anything else that might weaken the fragile, terrible thing holding Samuel upright. The mark on his right hand throbbed in time with his pulse. You and one. All that day, the plantation spun through its familiar motions. Men swung hoes in dusty rows. Women moved between house and yard with steaming pots and baskets of laundry. Children darted underfoot until an older voice snapped them back into line. The sun climbed, blistered, and began its slow tilt west. To anyone watching, Samuel was the same as always. He fixed a loose wheel on the cotton cart, checked the harnesses, nodded when the overseer barked orders. He carried hay to the stalls where Calhoun's horses snorted and stamped, their coats gleaming. But inside his skull, something ground and ground like millstones with nothing between them. At supper, he sat with his family in the dim of their cabin, the thin stew tasting of nothing. Ruth chatted about a song one of the other girls had taught her. Isaiah corrected her on the words. They bickered lightly. Mary watched them, a shadow in her eyes. When Ruth laughed and reached across Isaiah's arm to nudge her father, her sleeve slipped back just enough to show the faint, reddened curve on her palm. Samuel's spoon hovered halfway to his mouth. For a moment, it felt like the whole world, narrowed to that small, raw mark. He set the spoon down. "Let me see your hand, girl," he said softly. Ruth frowned but obeyed. He took her right hand in his and traced the healing cut with his thumb. She winced, then smiled, brave again. "See," she said. "It already closing. Ain't nothing." He looked at her for a long time. At the curve of her cheek, the scatter of faint scars on her knuckles from when she'd fallen as a little girl. At the intelligence in her gaze, bright as Isaiah's but turned toward people instead of pages. In his mind he saw another version of tomorrow night, one where his hand reached not for his son but for this girl, one where her small body pressed against his in the darkness under the wagon boards, their breaths shallow and matched as wheels rattled over ruts and dogs bayed in the distance. You and one. He felt suddenly, crushingly certain that whichever child he did not take would wake up 10 nights from now on this same pallet, with the same mark on the same right hand, and wonder why it had not been enough to save them. "Papa," Ruth murmured. "You hurting?" He realized his grip had tightened around her hand, his fingers digging into the tender edges of the cut. He forced himself to loosen them. "I'm all right," he lied. "We all right. Finish your supper." Later, when the lamps were out and the cabin was a tangle of shadows and breathing, Samuel lay awake again, staring at the low ceiling. Mary's whisper slipped through the dark. "You still thinking you can be 2 men at once?" she asked. "One that stay, one that go." He closed his eyes. "I keep trying to find a way they all fit on that wagon," he said, barely more than a breath. "You, them. Maybe if I... Mary's hand found his, their new scars brushing. "Samuel," she said gently, "there ain't no way. You know that." Something in him broke then, quietly, like a beam cracked deep inside a house where no one hears it fall. "How I look her in the eye," he whispered, "and not take her. How I look him in the eye and say it ain't him. Tell me how to be a father and a knife at the same time, Mary, 'cause that's what they asking." In the dark, he felt her shoulders shake once, a silent sob she forced back down. "You be what you always been," she said. "You be the one that takes the hurt that would kill the rest of us. You been doing that since I know you." She turned his hand over and pressed her lips to the mark on his palm. "You choose," she whispered into his skin. "And then you live with it if God lets you, or you die with it. But you don't let them make you believe you the one doing the cutting. They built this knife, Samuel, not you." He wanted to believe her, wanted to let that absolve him. But as he lay there with his family's breathing around him, it felt like a lie, too soft to stand against the iron fact of the road. Sometime in the restless hours before dawn, he dreamed again. This time he stood at the edge of a river, neither wide nor narrow, its surface black as oil, its current slow but relentless. On his right stood Isaiah, on his left Ruth. Both had their right hands raised, palms outward, the small scars glowing faintly like moons. On the far bank, a wagon waited, shadowed and still. A voice, not Mary's, not Wainwright's, not even his own, spoke over the water. "You and one." When he woke, the decision had not been made, no matter how many times he had tried to make it while the world slept. Dawn bled gray into the cracks again. The day of the crossing had come. Samuel sat up on the pallet, his right hand throbbing in time with his heart, and knew that he would walk every hour of this day, as a man carrying 2 children on his shoulders, to a door that would only open for one. By noon, the day felt wrong. The sky over Calhoun's land was a hard, merciless blue, the kind that promised no rain and no mercy. Heat lay over the fields in a wavering sheet, bending the rows of cotton like a mirage. Sweat slicked every neck, filled every shirt, made the dust clump on bare feet. But it wasn't the heat that made Samuel's skin itch. It was the way every sound seemed sharper today. the crack of the overseer's whip in the distance, the metallic rattle of harness buckles, the screech of a hawk circling high above, its shadow sliding over the fields like an omen. Isaiah swung his hoe 3 rows over, working in a shirt dark with sweat, his back straight despite the sun. He had grown into his shoulders almost overnight, it seemed. When had his boy stopped looking like a child? Samuel could not pinpoint the day. It was as if he had gone to sleep one night with a son who fit under his arm and woken up with someone who could stand eye to eye with him when they both were barefoot. "Isaiah!" The overseer barked suddenly. "You think the cotton pick itself?" Isaiah's jaw tightened, but he did not answer back. He just bent, hands moving quicker, the burlap sack at his hip rustling as white bowls dropped in. Smart, Samuel thought. Smart enough to keep your tongue in your mouth when a white man needs to hear it that way. Smart enough to read words that might save you if you ever reached a place where ink meant more than a brand on your skin. A place Samuel had never seen, but had to believe in, like some men believed in heaven. He straightened, stretching his back, and his gaze found Ruth on the far edge of the field. She was carrying water in a dented tin bucket, her steps careful, her small body weaving through the rows as she passed ladle after ladle to the field hands. Her headscarf had slipped back, a line of damp curls stuck to her forehead. "Thank you, baby," an older woman murmured, taking the dipper. "Lord, you such a blessing, Ruthie." Ruth smiled, shy and quick, her eyes flicking to where Samuel stood by the fence, ostensibly fixing a hinge. Her right hand, the one with the fresh scar, clutched the bucket's handle. He could see the way she favored it slightly, holding it differently than she had the day before. She caught him watching her and grinned as if to say, "See? I ain't broken." He looked away before she could see the way his own face betrayed him. Twice that day, mounted patrols passed the main road, dust pluming behind the horses' hooves. Men with rifles across their saddles, hats low, eyes scanning the ditches and tree lines. "New law," Wainwright's voice whispered in his memory. "They catch you running, they don't send you back in chains no more. They make a lesson of you." Samuel checked the harness on the wagon for the 3rd time, fingers moving by habit over leather and buckle. This was not the wagon they would use tonight. Their wagon would be a different one. A plain farm cart with a false bottom wading past the river in the dark. But the motions steadied him all the same. "Sam!" The overseer's shadow fell across him. "You done with that?" "Yes, sir," Samuel said, stepping back so the man could inspect his work. The overseer squinted, tugged once at the strap, nodded. His eyes were pale and washed out, his beard flecked with tobacco stains. Not crueler than most, not kinder, just another cog. "Mr. Calhoun wants you at the house after supper," he said. "Guests coming this weekend. He want the carriage shining. You be up there." Samuel's heart stumbled. "At the house," he repeated. "Deaf now?" The overseer scowled. "Yeah, you still his best man, ain't you? Don't get ideas about being too good for it." "No, sir," Samuel said quickly. "I'll be there." The man spit in the dust and rode off. Samuel stood very still for a long moment. The meeting with Wainwright was supposed to be after dark. The old sycamore tree past the river. 3 knocks on the wagon. 1 chance. If Calhoun kept him at the big house late, made him polish wheels and lanterns by lamplight, the timing would shift. The risk would multiply. He breathed once, slow and deep, the way he did when a spooked horse reared in the stall. Adjust, that was all. The road wouldn't bend for him. He would bend around it. At the well, Ruth had finished her water run and now sat on the low wall, swinging her legs. When he walked past, she hopped down and fell into step beside him, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. "Papa," she said quietly. "Ms. Calhoun say they having folks over for Sunday. She want me in the kitchen the whole day, maybe 2. He swallowed. She say that today. Ruth nodded. Say I got good hands. Quick. I heard her tell Cook. That one can learn housework fine if we polish her up some. Her mouth twisted around the words, mimicking the white woman's tone with cruel accuracy. Then she sobered. I don't want to go in that house, Papa. He knew why. Housework meant closer eyes on you. It meant constant presence of the mistress, of the master, of their sons and their guests. It meant no air that wasn't watched. For a girl of 14, it meant being seen in ways no father wanted his daughter seen. His hand tightened at his side. Images surged up unbidden, stories he'd heard in the quarters, whispers of girls called to the back stairs, of children born with the master's eyes. Stories no one said aloud in daylight, because to admit them was to admit there was no safe corner here, not even in your own body. You in the fields today, he said, buying seconds of time by stating the obvious. Today, she said. Sunday come fast, though. Sunday would not matter for her if tonight went the way he prayed it would. That thought carried its own, different kind of cruelty. Listen to me, Ruth, he said. He stopped walking, turned to face her. She looked up, eyes searching his, sensing something there she could not yet name. What? She asked. He almost said, if anything go wrong tonight, you do what your mama say. You keep your head low. You keep that mark hidden. You don't look the master in the eye. You make yourself quiet, small, invisible. Instead, the words that came out were, you remember that story I told you, about Moses? She blinked. From the good book? Yeah. He had pieced together bits of scripture and bits of stories the preacher in the quarters told. Made something out of it, for his children on nights when the lashings were too many and the food too thin. You remember what his mama did when the Pharaoh killing all the boy babies? Ruth frowned in concentration. Then her face lit. She hide him in a basket in the river, she said. Push him out where Pharaoh's daughter find him, so he live. That's right, Samuel said. She put him in the water, Ruth went on, thinking it through. But she didn't go in with him. She stand on the bank, watch, she let him go. Her voice softened on the last words. Her fingers, restless, moved to the inside of her right hand, rubbing the scabbed crescent there. She must have been scared, Ruth whispered, letting him float off like that. I don't know if I could have done it. Samuel looked at his daughter, at the way she was unknowingly standing on a story that was about to swallow them all. I reckon she ain't think she could neither, he said, till the river came. Ruth frowned, not fully understanding. Before she could ask, one of the kitchen girls shouted for her from the big house. Ruth! Miss Calhoun want you! Move! Ruth made a face but started to run, then doubled back and threw her arms around Samuel's waist in a quick, fierce hug that knocked the breath out of him. Love you, Papa, she said into his shirt, his arms wrapped around her by their own will. Love you too, baby girl, he murmured, his voice rough. Her cheek was hot against him. Her right hand, when it slid away, left a faint trace of heat on his side, where the mark pressed through the cloth. All afternoon, Samuel worked at the big house. The carriage's black paint reflected his bent figure in warped lines as he wiped it down, polished the brass lanterns, checked the wheels. From the open windows he heard fragments of conversation. Calhoun's booming drawl, his wife's higher, clipped tone, the rustle of skirts, the clink of china. In the kitchen, Ruth's movements were just sounds. Footsteps, the thud of a pot, a muffled, yes, ma'am. But Samuel's ears were drawn to them like iron to a magnet. Boy! Calhoun's voice snapped from the porch. You near done? Almost, sir, Samuel answered, forcing his attention back to the cloth in his hand. Just the back wheel left. Calhoun stepped down onto the drive, surveying the carriage like a general inspecting his men. Got a banker coming from town Sunday, he said. Man with sense. Investments up north, they say. I want him to see this place looking proper. Show him we don't need no Yankee telling us how to run our land. Yes, sir, Samuel said. Calhoun's gaze slid over him, lingering for a heartbeat on the bandage around his right hand. That whittling cut again? He asked. Yes, sir, Samuel said. Clumsy, I guess. Don't you go getting useless on me. Calhoun chuckled. You break that hand. I might have to put the boy in your place full time. He jerked his chin toward the fields, where Isaiah's dark shape bent and straightened in the distance. Already strong as a mule, Calhoun said. Got that smart look, too. That one worth something. The words crawled over Samuel's skin like ants. Worth something. Meant as praise, they sounded like appraisal. Like a man talking about a fine horse, a good plow, a tool that might outlast its owner. Yes, sir, Samuel said again, because there was nothing else he could safely say. By the time he was dismissed, the sun had dropped low, turning the edges of the clouds bruised purple and gold. The air cooled in that deceptive southern way, where the heat didn't leave so much as change clothes, slipping into the ground and the walls to radiate back slowly through the night. At supper, Mary watched him, her eyes asking questions she did not voice in front of the children. Isaiah ate quickly, every movement controlled. Ruth picked at her food, clearly exhausted from kitchen work, a smear of flour still on her wrist. Afterwards, when they stepped out into the twilight, the first stars trembling above the tree line, Samuel took a breath that felt like the last one before a plunge. Isaiah, he said, his voice too calm, take a walk with me. Need you to help check something by the river. Ruth immediately piped up. I can help too, Papa. Not this time, Samuel said, more sharply than he intended. Her face fell. He forced himself to soften. I need you to stay with your mama. Help her with the washing. We already did the washing, Ruth protested. Mary touched her shoulder lightly. Then help me look over your dress, she said, for Sunday. You heard Ms. Calhoun. Ruth made a face at the mention of Sunday, but she nodded. Samuel saw the way her eyes clung to him, though. The question there. Why can't I come? He could not answer it. Isaiah stepped beside him, taller now in the growing dark. As they walked away from the cabins, the sounds of evening dimmed behind them. Low talk, a baby's cry, the creak of a chair. Ahead, the trees thickened, shadows closing in. You ain't just checking the river, Isaiah said quietly, once they were out of earshot. It wasn't a question. Samuel smiled grimly. You always did see more than you supposed to. Isaiah's marked right hand brushed his own as they walked. The contact was accidental, but both of them felt the jolt. Tell me the truth, Isaiah said. You taking me, ain't you? There it was, laid bare between them, the raw core of the night. Samuel's throat went dry. You know how to read a room, he said slowly. You know how to listen. You heard me talking to Wainwright last week. I know you did. Isaiah did not deny it. I heard enough, he said. Man don't whisper about a wagon and a road north if he just planning a Sunday picnic. The corners of Samuel's mouth twitched despite himself. Pride and fear wrestled in his chest. You think you ready for what on that road? He asked. Isaiah's jaw tightened. I ready to be somewhere I ain't called boy by a man younger than me. I ready to sleep without hearing a whip in my dreams. I ready to... His voice broke for the first time. I ready to see Mama not look over her shoulder every time a white man walk by. They reached the edge of the river. In the day, it was muddy and unremarkable, a work river, carrying nothing but silt and stray branches. At night, it was a strip of black glass, its surface catching stars in broken fragments. The old sycamore tree loomed on the far bank, its pale trunk ghostly in the gloom. Somewhere beyond that, at the bend in the road, a wagon waited. Or not. Wainwright might have changed his mind. Patrols might have thickened. The world might have decided tonight was not the night after all. "You know I can't bring but one," Samuel said, the words tasting like metal. "I know." Isaiah's voice was steady now. Too steady. "I always knew." The frogs in the reeds croaked, filling the silence that followed. Somewhere upstream, a fish broke the surface with a faint splash. "I've been thinking," Isaiah said finally. "Ruth, she ain't built for this road, Papa. Not the way I am. She gets sick easier. She cry when she got fever, can't hide it. Men on this road, the ones that chase us, they look at girls different. You know that." Samuel did know that. Too well. "If I go," Isaiah went on, "I can work. I can keep my head down till we somewhere safe. Maybe I can, I don't know, find a way back. For y'all. Or send word. Something." He swallowed. "If she go, she might die before she ever see the other side of them trees." Samuel stared at his son, at the earnest desperation there. Isaiah was arguing for his own life, and yet every word contained more concern for his sister than for himself. "You telling me to choose you," Samuel said quietly. Isaiah flinched. "I'm telling you, if you choose me, it ain't 'cause you love her less." His eyes shone in the dim light. "You say that to yourself when it get bad. You say, I pick the one most likely to live." Samuel looked away, out over the water. When he spoke, it was so soft the night barely caught it. "I spent all day," he said, "trying to find a way to not choose. Thought maybe I could send you first. Stay behind, wait for another chance, take her next time." He laughed once, bitter. "Like they gonna give us a second chance at something like this." Isaiah's hand tightened on his arm. "There ain't gonna be a next time, Papa," he said. "You know that." Yes. Samuel knew. He also knew that somewhere back in the dim light of the cabins, Ruth was probably sitting on their pallet, tracing the mark on her right hand with her left, wondering why it still ached. He thought of Mary, standing in the doorway, not calling after them when they left, the way her eyes had met his for one lingering second, saying more than any words, "Do what you must. Come back if you can. If you can't, make it worth it." "What if the wagon ain't there?" Isaiah asked, his voice suddenly small in the open space. "What if this all some trick, trap? Then we go back," Samuel said, "or we die right there in them trees. Either way, I ain't dying on this land with the taste of Calhoun's dust in my mouth." They waited until full dark wrapped the river, until the last glimmer of twilight drained from the sky. The plantation behind them quieted, lights in the big house shrinking to a few pinpricks in the distance. Dogs barked once, twice, then fell silent. "Time," Samuel said at last. They slipped along the riverbank, following the faint path beaten by years of feet, hauling water and washing clothes. At a shallow bend, they waded through, the cold grabbing at their ankles. Mud sucked at their toes, reeds whispered against their legs. On the far side, they climbed up into the shelter of the trees. The old sycamore stood like a pale sentinel, its trunk twisted, branches reaching out like arms. Beyond it, on the narrow dirt road, a wagon waited. It was an unremarkable farm wagon, wheels muddied, boards stained. A small mule was hitched to it, ears flicking as they approached. On the driver's seat, a hunched shape sat wrapped in a coat, hat pulled low. Samuel's breath caught. "Wainwright," he whispered. The man turned his head, the angle of his jaw familiar even in the dark. "You almost late," Wainwright hissed. "Patrol went by just now. I thought you lost your nerve." Samuel let out a breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding. "We here," he said. Wainwright's gaze slid to Isaiah. "That the boy?" Isaiah lifted his chin. "Yes, sir." "Don't sir me," Wainwright muttered. "I ain't nobody's master." He climbed down, boots landing with a soft thud. Up close, Samuel could see the lines of fear etched around his eyes, the sweat on his upper lip despite the cool. He walked to the side of the wagon and tapped the boards 3 times in quick succession. There was a muffled answering rap from underneath. Samuel blinked. "You said," he began. "Yeah, I said 1. Wainwright cut in, low and furious. "You think you the only man desperate round here? Got another man and his wife from the Walker place already in there. They come earlier than you. I ain't sending 'em back." The world tilted. The false bottom Samuel had imagined as empty save for him and his child was already half full. Space narrowed in his mind, physically, brutally. "How we all fit?" Isaiah asked, his voice thin. "You said—" "I know what I said," Wainwright snapped. "Plans changed. Patrol's thicker than I thought. I can't make 2 trips. You get in, you press close, you don't make a sound, less I tell you, or we all die on the road. You understand?" Samuel stared at the wagon, at the dark space beneath the boards where other bodies already lay hidden, breathing that hot, cramped air, hearts pounding loud enough, it seemed, to give them away. He had thought the choice was between Ruth and Isaiah. He had not considered that he would also be pressing someone else's hope up against his own, all of them crammed into a sliver of wood and dark, rolling toward whatever waited. "Sam," Wainwright's voice cut through his spinning thoughts. "We gotta move. You bring in the boy or not?" Samuel's right hand burned like fire. He saw Ruth's face when she hugged him. He saw Isaiah's eyes when he said, "If you choose me, it ain't 'cause you love her less." He saw Mary standing in the cabin doorway, hand on the frame, shoulders squared as if she were holding up the whole house alone. Behind him in the trees, an owl hooted once. On the road beyond, somewhere far off, a dog barked. "We should go back." A muffled voice drifted from under the wagon boards. The man from Walker's place, surely. "You all taking too long. They gon' catch us before we even start." "Shut up," Wainwright hissed toward the floor. Then to Samuel. "Last chance. You come now or you don't come at all." Time, which had dragged like a stone all day, suddenly sped up, narrowing into a single, blinding bright thread. Samuel turned. In the darkness between the trees, just beyond the reach of the wagon's shadow, a small shape stood. Ruth. She had followed them. Her dress clung to her calves, wet from the river. Her hair had slipped free of its scarf, sticking in damp curls to her cheeks. Her eyes, wide and dark, fixed on her father and brother with a kind of furious betrayal. "You was gonna leave without saying goodbye," she said, her voice shaking. It was not a question. Samuel's heart stopped. "Ruth." His voice came out strangled. "What you doing here, girl? I told you." "You told me to help Mama with nothing," she snapped, stepping closer. "You think I'm stupid? Everybody in the quarters knows something stirring. Men whispering, women crying where they think we can't hear. You think I ain't see the way you look at Isaiah all day? The way you look at me." Her right hand was clenched at her side, the mark on her palm pressed so deep into her own flesh it must have hurt. "I thought," her voice cracked, "I thought maybe you was taking us all. Maybe you had some miracle you ain't told us yet. But then I see you walking out with just him." Tears glinted on her cheeks, angry and hot. "You was gonna pick," she whispered. "Between us, you was really gonna do it." Behind Samuel, Wainwright cursed under his breath. "We ain't got time for this," he muttered. "Get in the damn wagon. or go home to your chains, but choose. The night closed in, thick and humming. The river murmured behind them. The wagon waited, its dark mouth open, a wooden beast swallowing futures. Samuel's pulse hammered in his ears. He had spent the last 24 hours rehearsing this moment in his mind, telling himself the reasons, building an argument of love and survival and cold, hard chance. I take the one most likely to live. I take the one who can work, who can read, who can someday come back. I take the boy. He had even started to make peace, if such a thing were possible, with the idea of looking Ruth in the eye and not reaching for her. But in all his rehearsals, she had not been standing there at the wagon. She had been safe in the cabin, asleep. Her last memory of him, a hug and a lie. Now she was here, wet and shaking, her whole soul laid bare in her gaze. "Papa," she said. The word was a plea and an accusation and a prayer all at once. Isaiah stepped forward. "Ruth," he said, "it ain't. Don't you talk," she snapped at him, grief turning her words sharp. "You knew, didn't you? You been knowing that he was gonna take you." Isaiah flinched as if struck. "Please," he tried again. "Ruthie, listen." "No!" she cried. "No, I won't listen. You both talk about Moses and rivers and later like it's some story. But this ain't a story. This now." Her voice broke on the last word. She looked at Samuel again, and in her eyes he saw not a child, but a judge. "Who you putting in the basket, Papa?" she whispered. "Which one of us you throw in the river?" The world held its breath. Wainwright's hand clamped on Samuel's arm. "We got to move," he hissed. "Patrol come down this road every hour. You want your children hanging from a tree by morning. You just keep standing there." Samuel shook him off without taking his eyes from his daughter. He stepped closer to her, so that he could see the freckles on her nose, the tiny scar above her eyebrow from where she'd fallen as a toddler, and he had carried her, bleeding and screaming, all the way from the fields to the quarters. He lifted his hands. For a heartbeat, they hovered between them, empty. Then very slowly, he reached toward Ruth. Her breath hitched, her eyes flooded with a wild, desperate hope that punched through his ribs like a fist. His hands framed her face. He bent down and pressed his forehead to hers. Her skin was cold from the river, hot from tears. "I love you," he said, the words breaking him in half. "I love you more than breath, more than my own life. You hear me, Ruth? You hold this in your bones." She nodded, sobbing now, her fingers clutching at his shirt. He kissed her cheeks, her brow, her wet hair, as if he could baptize her in the memory of his touch, as if he could pour all his strength into her through his skin. "Papa," she whispered, "please." He wrapped his arms around her, crushing her to his chest so tightly it hurt them both. In that embrace, he tried, like a man drowning, to pull all her pain into himself, to take it and lock it away where it could not reach her. For a second, in that small, terrible circle of their bodies, there was no wagon, no river, no patrols, no Calhoun. Only a father and a daughter and the sound of their hearts beating against each other. Then he let go. His hands slid down her arms. In the same motion, with a speed that did not feel like his own, he turned. His right hand shot out and closed around Isaiah's wrist. "Get in," he said, his voice hoarse and final. Isaiah stumbled, eyes wide, as Samuel propelled him toward the wagon. Behind him, Ruth made a sound that was not quite a scream, not quite a word. A raw, ripped-out noise that seemed to tear the air itself. She reached after him, fingers grasping at his sleeve, at his hand, at nothing. "Papa!" The name tore from her throat, but even as she cried it, her voice failed. The sound collapsed into a harsh, strangled whisper. "Papa." It was as if the night itself had stolen her voice mid-cry, shoving it back down her throat. Her mouth shaped the plea, but only a rasp came out. Her eyes, though, her eyes screamed. Samuel did not look back. If he turned now, if he saw her face, he knew something in him would break beyond repair, and there would be nothing left to move his feet. He pushed Isaiah toward the side of the wagon where Wainwright had already yanked up the loose board, revealing the dark hollow beneath. Hot, stale air puffed out, smelling of fear and hay and cramped bodies. "Quick!" the muffled man from beneath hissed. "Get in, boy, get in!" Isaiah scrambled, half falling, his hands scrabbling on the rough wood. Samuel's grip on his arm was iron. Behind them, Ruth's whisper scraped through the dark again, torn and unbelieving. "Papa!" The word followed him like a curse as he bent to shove his son into the narrow space between someone else's hope and the thin boards of a road that did not care who it carried or who it left behind. And for the first time since he had been born into chains, Samuel wished. Not for freedom, not for vengeance, not even for God's justice. He wished he had never been given a choice at all. The wagon boards dropped with a dull thud, plunging Isaiah into darkness. Samuel straightened, his hands empty now, the echo of his daughter's almost voice ringing in his skull. Wainwright grabbed his sleeve. "You coming or not?" he demanded. "We can fit you, barely, but that's it, that's all, no more." Samuel's gaze flicked once, just once, toward the trees where Ruth stood, small and shaking, her right hand pressed against her chest, as if she were holding her own breaking heart in place beneath the skin. Her eyes met his. In them he saw everything he had ever been and everything he had failed to be. The mule stamped, impatient, harness jingling. Far down the road, faint but growing, came the unmistakable jangle of another set of reins. The patrol. Wainwright swore. "Now, Sam, decide!" Samuel's right hand throbbed. The mark burned like a brand. He took a step toward the wagon. The choice had been made, but the river inside him had only just begun to rise. Night came down like a lid. By the time the horn from the big house sounded to send everyone from the yard to the quarters, Samuel felt as if the day had worn through his skin. Every sound cut sharper. The clatter of pots in the kitchen, the murmur of voices in the dusk, the overseer's laugh rolling across the yard like a threat that never slept. "Ruth, you help Miss Liza put them rags to soak," the cook had called as the sun eased itself behind the trees. "Isaiah, you take them scraps to the hogs." Samuel watched his children move through the fading light. Each step counted against an invisible clock. Wainwright had said, "After midnight. No moon tonight. By the old sycamore past the river. You and one." Now the moon was a faint smear behind clouds. Useless. Good. The dark would be their only ally. In the cabin, the air was thick with heat and fear. Mary packed without looking like she was packing. A shirt rolled into a bundle that could just as easily be laundry. A heel of bread wrapped in cloth, tucked under a blanket. A tin cup, an extra pair of socks, a small Bible Isaiah had once been allowed to hold in church and never stopped thinking about. "Take it," the old preacher had whispered months ago when Samuel returned it to him after service, eyes shining. Words don't belong to white men alone. Now the book lay in Isaiah's lap, its thin pages crinkling under his thumb as if they might speak up and tell him which road led to living and which to dying. "Don't bring nothing that clinks," Samuel murmured. "Nothing that weigh more than you can throw away in a step." Isaiah nodded, jaw set. Ruth sat cross-legged, pretending to mend a torn hem, needle flashing in the candlelight. Her right hand, still faintly reddened with the little crescent scar, moved carefully. "You ain't eating," Mary said, breaking a flat corn cake and pressing a piece into Samuel's hand. "You gotta walk same as him." He took it because refusing would have been more cruel than choking it down. His stomach was a hard knot. He chewed and tasted dust. "Tell me again," Ruth said suddenly. "Tell me about the place where snow falls like cotton. except it don't melt in your hand. Canada, free states, names that sounded like lies and psalms at once. Samuel swallowed. Ain't my story to tell, he said. Only heard it in scraps. Men come through whispering. Say in some places a colored man can stand on a street and no one can lay claim on him. Say you get a paper, and that paper mean more than a whip. Ruth's eyes shone. You see it? No, he said. The admission tasted like shame. But I seen men who say they seen it. And I seen what this place do. That enough. Silence settled again, broken only by the scratch of Ruth's needle and the faint drip from a leak in the roof into a pan near the door. Outside, the last of the talk dwindled. Feet shuffled, doors creaked. One by one, the other cabins closed themselves around their own weariness. Mary went to the door, lifted the latch a fraction, peered out, then slid it back into place. Her face was a pale smudge in the dim. "It time," she whispered. Samuel listened. The night answered with its own sounds. Crickets, a distant owl, the slow creak of a board in the overseer's shack. No footsteps near, no voices close. "Not yet," he whispered back. "We wait till all dead asleep. Less eyes, less questions if they notice come morning. If." He had avoided the shape of that word all day. If they notice, as if there were any chance they would not. As if Calhoun were the sort of man to shrug and say, "Let him go, I got others." "They'll notice," Isaiah said quietly, as if hearing his thought. "Man like that, he count what's his, every finger." Mary shot him a look, half reprimand, half sorrow. "Don't you borrow trouble before it here." Ruth set her needle down. "We all going," she said, with the certainty of 14. "We small, we can fit. I can curl up like when I was little." The room went colder. Samuel's heart kicked once, hard against his ribs. "Baby girl," he started. She lifted her chin. "Don't call me baby." It struck him then how much her voice had changed in the last year. How much woman had crept into the edges of her face while he was busy counting cotton sacks and mending wheels. He saw, for a flash, the way the overseer's eyes had begun to linger on the older girls. The way Miss Calhoun's cousin from Savannah had laughed too loud last month and let his hand stray when Ruth passed behind him with a tray. "You got long legs now," Samuel said, trying for lightness and failing. "You and your brother both too long to stack up like firewood." "We can try," she insisted. "We can at least try. They can't stop us all if we move fast." "They can," Isaiah said, not unkindly. "That what guns do." He looked at his father. "You said we trust this man, this conductor. You said one wagon, one chance." Samuel's marked hand curled on his knee. "I did." "And you said—" Isaiah hesitated, then went on, the words thick. "You said you talked to God about it." Mary's head turned sharply. Samuel met his son's gaze. "I did that too." "What he say?" Ruth demanded. Samuel thought of the silent, blank stretch of sky he had stared at behind the barn, of the way his own voice had sounded in his head, small against the vast, indifferent dark. "He say the same thing he always say," Samuel answered slowly. "He say, 'I gave you them hands, you move 'em.'" Mary's breath left her in a faint, bitter chuckle. "Sounds 'bout right." Time thickened. The candle burned low, guttered. Shadows lengthened on the walls, making giants of the small things they threw. When the flame finally died, the darkness felt absolute. Mary's hand found Samuel's in it, squeezed once. "It's time," she breathed. They moved like thieves in their own lives. Isaiah slid the little Bible into his shirt, flat against his chest. Ruth wrapped her palm in a rag so it wouldn't smear if she had to brace herself. Mary tied a headscarf over her hair, fingers steady. Samuel went to each of them in turn. To Mary, He pressed his forehead to hers, their breaths mingling. "Whatever happened," he murmured, "you remember." "I know," she cut in softly. "I know who you are." To Isaiah, he put both hands on his son's shoulders, feeling the solid strength there. "You walk when I say walk. You lie when I say lie," he said. "You don't speak less you got to. You hear something behind you. You don't look back. You hold on to that book like it the last piece of light in this world." Isaiah nodded once, jaw clenched so tight a muscle jumped. To Ruth. To Ruth he saved for last because he did not trust himself. She stepped into him without waiting, threw her arms around his waist, pressed her face into his chest. She smelled of smoke and soap and the faint sweetness of the salve Mary had rubbed into the cut on her hand. "You come back," she mumbled into his shirt. "Ain't no mark in this world makes sense if you don't come back." His arms folded around her on their own. His right hand slid up to cradle the back of her head, fingers tangling in her hair. For a second he let himself hold her like there was no clock, no wagon, no road. "I'll find you," he said, and it was the closest thing to a lie he had ever dared speak to his children. "Wherever they put you, wherever you go, I'll find you." "Don't say it if it ain't." She pulled back enough to look up at him, eyes searching his face. "You always say words matter." "They do," he said. His throat felt raw. "That why I'm saying 'em." He kissed her forehead, then, unable to help himself, the side of her face, the corner of her eye, as if he could drink in every line, every freckle, carry them with him like contraband. "Samuel," Mary whispered from the door. "We got to move." He let Ruth go as if prying his own fingers off a ledge. The yard was a wash of gray on gray when they slipped out, shapes more sensed than seen. The big house loomed up the rise, a darker bulk against the sky, its windows blank. Somewhere near, a dog snored, then snuffled, turned over. They moved in a line, Samuel first, Isaiah a step behind, Mary with Ruth's hand in hers. They did not speak. The soft thud of bare feet on packed earth was loud enough. Past the cookhouse, where ashes smoldered under last evening's fire. Past the sheds where tools slept. Past the whipping post, its stained wood a shadow they did not look at. At the edge of the quarters, Samuel lifted his hand, and they crouched, the brush swallowing them. His heart hammered so hard he thought it might shake the leaves. In the distance, the overseer's shack showed no light. "Now," he breathed. They slipped into the trees. The path to the river was one Samuel had walked 100 times in daylight, hauling buckets with other men, listening to the easy filth of their talk as they tried to joke the weight out of their bones. At night it was another place entirely. Branches grabbed at clothes. Roots reached for ankles. The rustle of something small fleeing through the undergrowth sounded like an army. Once, a twig snapped too loud under Ruth's foot. They froze as one body. A nightbird scolded, then went silent. Nothing else moved. Samuel could feel Ruth's breath on the back of his neck, quick and shallow. Isaiah's hand brushed his shoulder once, a brief touch like a question. He kept moving. The river smell reached them before the river did. Damp, earthy, with a faint tang of rot. When the trees broke at last, the dark line of water lay ahead, black on black. The old sycamore loomed on the far bank, its pale trunk a ghost in the night. And there, a fraction to the left, a shape, hunched low, a wagon, its outline just visible, a horse hitched and shifting, snorting softly. Samuel's lungs forgot how to work for one heartbeat, then another. He had not let himself fully believe Wainwright would come. Too many men said too many things in whispers behind stores, where the heat and the fear made their tongues brave. Too many stories started with promises and ended at the hanging tree. But the wagon was there. The road was there. "Wait here," he whispered over his shoulder. "Don't move less I tell you." He stepped out of the brush alone, hands lifted slightly, empty. "Wainwright!" he hissed, just loud enough. For a moment, nothing. Then the wagon canvas shifted, and a figure slid down, landing light in the mud. "'Bout time," Wainwright muttered, voice tight. "You cut it close. Patrol came through an hour ago. I had to take the long way. We gotta move fast." His hat brim hid most of his face, but his hand shook when he reached to pat the horse's neck. "You alone?" Samuel asked. "I ain't bring no choir." Wainwright glanced past him, eyes narrowing. "They there." Samuel nodded once. "Bring 'em, quick." He turned back to the brush and lifted his fingers. Mary, Isaiah, Ruth emerged, 3 shadows sliding toward the riverbank. Wainwright's gaze flicked over them. Even in the dark, Samuel saw the moment the white man's jaw tightened at the sight of Ruth. "Lord," Wainwright muttered. "She just a girl." Ruth flinched, though his tone held no cruelty, only some bitter recognition. "You said," Samuel began. "I know what I said." Wainwright cut him off. "I meant it. 1, I built that false bottom myself. Too small for more. You want to die tonight, we can try to pile all of you in there and see who falls out first." He moved to the back of the wagon, fingers finding hidden latches in the frame. With a grunt, he lifted a section of the floor. Underneath, a dark, shallow space yawned. Samuel looked. It was smaller than he had imagined, barely deep enough for 2 grown bodies to lie flat, shoulder to shoulder, with a few inches of breath above them when the board slid back. Sacks of feed and bundles of rags were stacked nearby, ready to be thrown on top. "Man can't hardly breathe in there," Isaiah said, low. "Better than not breathing at all," Wainwright snapped. Then softer. "We ain't got time for second thoughts. They change patrol routes every week now. They catch us on this side of the river. They call it stealing property. They catch us on that side. They call it running a ring. Either way, it's a rope for me. Lash or worse for you. You want it, you take it. You don't, I go." Mary stepped closer to the wagon, staring into the dark hollow. "How long they gotta stay under?" she asked. "Till we pass the first guard post. Couple hours, maybe 3. Wainwright shrugged one shoulder. "I knock twice when it's safe to crack at a hair. Any noise out of turn, any board shift, any sound, and patrol hear us. I ain't know you." He looked at Samuel, and for the first time there was no distance between them. Only 2 men caught in the gears of something larger and merciless. "You still got that choice," he said quietly. "It's a hell of a thing, but it's yours. You and one," the river whispered. The horse pawed the dirt. Samuel turned away from the wagon and faced his family. Mary's face was unreadable, carved of shadow and will. Isaiah stood stiff, his marked right hand fisted at his side. Ruth's eyes were wide, fixed on him, the way they had been when she was small and fever had burned her and he had sat all night with a damp rag, whispering nonsense just to keep her here. He had told himself all day that he would make the choice before this moment, that he would walk down to the river with one of their names like a stone in his mouth. Ready, decided, that when he came to the edge of the cliff, he would already be falling. He had lied to himself. "Isaiah," he heard himself say. The boy's head jerked. Ruth inhaled like she'd been struck. "For the reading," Samuel went on, his own words echoing as if someone else spoke them through his throat. "For what you got here." He touched 2 fingers to Isaiah's temple, then to his chest. "You know letters. You know numbers. You can carry more than just your own body across that line. You hear me?" Isaiah's mouth opened, closed. "Papa," he began. "Don't make me say it twice," Samuel said, harsher than he meant, because if his voice softened, it would break. Ruth took a step forward. "No," she said, his brave girl, his wild-eyed girl. "No, you said, we all." Her right hand lifted of its own accord, palm out. The little crescent scar, a dark shadow. He saw her at 10, chasing chickens. At 5, clinging to his leg when thunder shook the cabin. At 2, sleeping on his chest while he hummed tuneless lullabies. He saw her at 20, maybe, if the world were different. Laughing with some man her own choosing, holding a child of her own. In this world he saw something else. The way the overseer watched the girls who moved from child to woman. The way a girl could be cut down or used up, and no one would even bother to carve her name into anything. He took a step toward her, hand reaching. She thought, for one impossible, merciful second, that he was reaching to pull her in. Her eyes lit with a hope so fierce it hurt to look at. She half raised her arms, ready, her body angling toward the wagon. His hand touched her face instead. He cupped her cheek, thumb brushing the wet that had sprung to her lashes, before she realized she was crying. His palm covered almost her whole jaw. He leaned in and pressed his lips to her brow, then to each cheek, slow, desperate, like benedictions. He tried, with that touch, to pull the grief out of her, to drag it into himself through skin and bone, to take every hurt the next years would hold and stack them on his own back instead. "Ruth," he whispered into her hair. "My Ruth. My brave one." Her fingers clutched at his shirt, bunching the fabric. "Papa," she said again. But now the word was thin, flayed. "Papa, please, I can be small. I can—" He moved. In that single breath, he did the cruelest, kindest thing he had ever done. With his left arm he tightened his hold on Ruth, pinning her against him so she could not follow, could not throw herself toward the wagon, could not make a sound that would carry. With his right, he reached past her, grabbed Isaiah by the back of his shirt, and hauled him toward the open false bottom. Isaiah stumbled, eyes flying wide. "No! Wait! Ruth! Don't you fight me," Samuel hissed, voice raw. "Don't you dare. You take this, boy. You take it." Wainwright was there suddenly, hands grabbing Isaiah's arms, helping drag him up and into the dark cavity. "Lie flat," the white man muttered. "On your back, arms at your sides. Breathe shallow. Think of nothing. Think of stone." "Papa!" Ruth's voice ripped out of her at last. It came not as a scream, but as a ragged whisper that still seemed to tear the air. "Papa," she choked. "No, no, no!" Samuel's grip convulsed. She twisted in his hold, fingernails scrabbling at his chest. He turned her face into him, pressing her mouth against his shirt, muffling the sound. "I'm sorry," he gasped into her hair. "I'm sorry, I'm sorry." His words melted against the fabric as much as her cry. Isaiah's legs slid in under the boards. For a second, his face was still visible in the faint light. A pale oval, eyes huge, lips moving. "Ruth," he mouthed. "Mama." Samuel saw his own fear mirrored there, doubled. "Don't you waste it," Samuel said, low and fierce, his gaze locking with his son's for what he knew, with a certainty like pain, might be the last time. "You live. You hear me? You live so hard my death got meaning." Isaiah's throat bobbed. He nodded once. "Close it," Wainwright urged. "For God's sake, close it." The false floor slid back into place with a dull wooden thud. The wagon looked ordinary again. Just boards and canvas and a horse that shook its head, jingling the bit softly. Ruth went slack in his arms. For a horror-filled heartbeat, Samuel thought she had fainted, that her small body had simply shut down under the weight of it. Then he realized the truth was worse. She was holding herself rigid, her muscles vibrating, every breath a shudder, but she made no sound now. Her eyes stared past him, fixed on the spot where the opening had been, dry and wide, as if the tears had frozen. "You chose," she whispered. You chose him. The words were not accusation. They were a flat statement of fact, and that was how he knew he had broken something that would not mend clean. I chose for all of us, Samuel said, hating how weak it sounded even in his own head. I chose. You chose him, she said again. Mary stood like a carved post, one hand over her mouth, the other clenched so hard around the strap of her bundle that her knuckles shone. Samuel, Wainwright hissed, we gotta go. We on a clock here. You want to put another one in there, you'll kill 'em both. You want to come, you climb up now. You stay, you get away from this wagon. Dogs can smell fear same as anything. Samuel turned to Mary, desperation clawing. You could come, he rasped. We could. She shook her head once, a tiny, terrible motion. Go, she said. One of us gotta stay with her. They wake up tomorrow, and she alone. They eat her alive. Her eyes met his, and in them he saw everything. Love, fury, an understanding so deep it cut. I'll hold her together best I can, she said. You hold him. That how we do it now. He reached for her with his free hand. Their fingers met, the new scars on their right palms pressing together for a heartbeat. Find us, he begged, the word ripping out of him before he could swallow it. If there any way in this world to... If there is, she said, you the one who'll find it. That what you do, Samuel. You find roads where white men say there ain't none. A shout echoed, faint but distinct, upstream. A man's voice, then another, angry. A dog barked, answering. Wainwright flinched. Now or never, he grabbed Samuel's sleeve. Climb, Samuel looked down at Ruth. Her face had gone calm, in the way still water is calm before something breaks the surface. Her right hand hung at her side, fingers curled just enough to show the crescent scar. Ruth, he whispered, my girl, look at me. Slowly, as if it cost her, she lifted her eyes to his. In them, he saw not a child, and not yet a woman, but someone standing on a narrow strip of ground between those two countries, watching the bridge burn behind her. Will you come back? She asked. The question was a knife with no handle. He could not say yes. The lie would cheapen everything. He could not say no. That truth would hollow her out. I will carry you, he said instead, voice shaking. In this hand. He lifted his marked right palm. And in this heart, every step, every breath, wherever I go, till I can't walk no more. She stared at him for a long, long beat. Then, very softly, as if the word itself were too heavy for her throat, she said, Papa. He bent and kissed her forehead one last time. Her skin was hot under his lips. Her hair smelled of smoke and river damp. He held on for a second too long, until Wainwright swore under his breath and yanked at his sleeve again. He let her go. The absence of her weight in his arms felt like falling. He climbed. Wainwright shoved a sack into his hands. Lay it on top of you when I give the signal, he muttered. Make like you just another lump of feed. Samuel settled on the wagon bed, heart roaring in his ears, the boards hard under his back. Above him, the sky showed in a thin strip between canvas and sideboard. Mary stepped back, drawing Ruth with her into the shadows of the trees. Ruth did not look away from the wagon. Not once. The horse shifted, leather creaked. Wainwright clicked his tongue, climbed to the front, took the reins. Stay still, he hissed over his shoulder. Don't breathe deep. Remember, stone. The wagon lurched. As it rolled forward, bumping over ruts, the river slid past in the dark. For a moment, Samuel could see them. A flash of Mary's headscarf, white as a scrap of bone. Ruth's thin silhouette, her right hand hanging at her side. His own right palm burned, the crescent cut a hot brand. He lifted it, just enough that his fingertips pressed against the board over his head. He felt Faintly, from beneath, another touch. Isaiah's hand, answering, pressed up from the tight darkness below. 2 right hands, 4 scars, 1 road. The shout upstream came again, closer this time. Another answered from the far bank. Wainwright snapped the reins. The horse broke into a trot. Hay tumbled over Samuel as sacks were dragged into place. The thin strip of sky disappeared. Weight pressed down, air thinned, the sounds of the world muffled. Hoofbeats, wheel crunch, distant voices, the river's murmur. In the thick, hot dark, with the mark on his palm burning and the image of his daughter's eyes etched into his skull, Samuel lay as still as he could and began the long work of learning how to breathe in a world where every choice tasted like loss. Isaiah never forgot the sound of his father's voice the last time he heard it as a living thing above him. Not the words, those he carried like scripture, but the roughness, the way each syllable seemed dragged over stone. After that, there was only wood and weight and the hot, stale breath of the false bottom pressing down. For a while, time stopped meaning anything. He lay flat in the dark with his arms pinned to his sides, his knees barely able to bend. The boards above his face were so close he could feel the grain against the bridge of his nose when the wagon lurched. Dust sifted down with each rut. Somewhere beyond the thin wooden world, hoofbeats thudded, wheels ground. A man's voice cursed softly at the horse. Here, there was only 3 things: pain, breath, and the hammering of his own heart. He tried to make his mind small. His father's last command echoed, "Breathe shallow. Think of Stone." Stone did not think about the sister left on a riverbank with her mouth open and no sound coming out. Stone did not see, even behind its own closed eyes, the instant when a hand reached for it and veered away, catching another instead. He could still feel his father's fingers on the back of his neck, the shove that had not been rough, but had not been gentle either. The way Samuel's eyes had burned, desperate, pleading, furious at the world and at himself, right before the floor slid over Isaiah's face and turned him into cargo. He would have screamed if there had been room in his lungs. He did not scream. His right palm, trapped against his thigh, throbbed where the small crescent cut lay. He flexed it as much as the cramped space allowed, seeking some anchor in that shared pain. Above him, faint through the planks and the muffling hay, he heard another scuff. Someone else shifting. His father, on the wagon bed. The knowledge was a thin thread of comfort. He pressed his hand up, fingers splayed until his knuckles met splintered wood. For a second, no more than the beat of a single heart. Pressure answered back from the other side. A palm to palm that never quite touched. 2 scars aligning through an inch of board. Then a shout rang out from somewhere ahead, sharp and close. "Ho there! Wagon! Where you headed this hour?" The pressure vanished. Weight thumped down above Isaiah's hand. Sacks being shifted, hay thrown. The world cinched tighter. "Evenin', Mr. Cawley." Wainwright's cheerful drawl floated down, thinned by distance and wood. "Just taking feed up to McKell's farm. His boy says his stock hungry. You know how he is. Can't let him go a night without grain or he think they'll drop dead on him." A lantern's glow leaked in thin lines around the joints of the boards as someone outside lifted a light. Isaiah shut his eyes against it out of habit. Bootsteps came closer. The wagon rocked as a weight climbed onto the sideboard. "Late for feed, ain't it?" another voice said, suspicious. "Patrol saw you across the river not an hour ago." "McKell don't sleep when his horses are hungry," Wainwright said. He laughed, easy. "You want to be the one tell him I turned back 'cause you was scared of the dark." The boards right above. Isaiah creaked as someone put a hand down, pressing. The pressure on his chest intensified. He forced his lungs to remember their work. "Let me see under there," the second voice said. Closer now. Heard talk about some smart-mouthed buck from Calhoun's place running his mouth in town. Figured he might get notions. Isaiah's blood turned to ice. He imagined the false floor wrenched up, lantern light pouring in, white faces looming, hands like hooks dragging him out. The snap of rope, the whip's hiss. His father hauled from the wagon bed like a sack. "Stone!" he told himself wildly. "Be Stone!" Wainwright spat, the sound sharp. "You think a Negro from Calhoun's got business on my wagon? You gone crazier than he is cheap," he scoffed. "Man guard his stock tighter'n his wife. I'm hauling sacks, that's all. Ain't you got better things to do than poke holes in a man's floorboards? That would cost me near as much as your salary." Silence. Then unexpectedly, a dry chuckle from the guard. "Well, I know that's a lie," he said. "Calhoun don't pay me near enough." A boot thumped back to the ground. "Go on then. You see any wanderers on the road, you give a holler. We got posters up for that boy. There's reward money in it." Isaiah's heart slammed. Posters. His face. His name. He remembered the way the white men in town had looked at him sometimes when Calhoun brought him along to carry parcels, their eyes flicking from his dark skin to the way he glanced at signs and took them in. "Boy reads," Calhoun had boasted once, like he was showing off a clever dog. "Look at him. Sneakin' looks at them bills. Don't do him no good. All printed by white hands." He had laughed, heavy and satisfied. Not seeing the way, Isaiah's fists had tightened at his sides. Now those signs might have his height scratched on them, the shape of his jaw, the tilt of his eyes. Property, runaway, reward. "Reckon I will," Wainwright said. "You boys keep this road safe. Somebody gotta think of the merchants." The lantern light flicked away. Bootsteps retreated. The wagon shifted as the guard jumped down. A dog barked, then lost interest as Wainwright clicked to the horse. The wheels lurched. The river's whisper fell behind them. Only when the sounds of voices and dog and lantern clash had thinned to memory did Wainwright's voice drift down again, hushed, strained. "You still breathing down there?" he muttered. Isaiah tried to answer. His chest burned. When he sucked in air, hay dust scratched his throat. "Yes," he croaked, barely audible. "Good," Wainwright said. "Keep it that way. First post done. 2 more, and we in the trees for a spell. Your daddy, you hear me?" Isaiah shifted his head, enough that his cheek brushed the board. Yes. He couldn't see his father, but he pictured him, lying stiff among the sacks, muscles locked, eyes on the canvas ceiling, every sense straining for the sound of a shot, a shout, his son's concealed breath stopping. "You watch him, Lord." Mary had once prayed over Isaiah when he was small and fever had licked at his bones. "You got his eyes on you," she'd murmured afterward, cupping his face. "And your daddy's. You don't forget that." In the box, surrounded by darkened weight, Isaiah opened his right hand as far as the cramped space allowed. He could not reach his father anymore, but he could feel the little crescent throb. He counted his breaths to it. 1 for Ruth, 1 for Mama, 1 for Papa, 1 for himself. Over and over, like beads on a string. Outside, the world rolled on. They passed another checkpoint. This one a sleepy farm boy with a lantern and a half-buttoned coat, more interested in the contents of his own nose than the contents of the wagon. Wainwright cursed about grain prices. The boy nodded. The horse snorted. They moved on. At last, after what felt like days compressed into an hour, the cadence of the wheels changed, no longer rattling over river stones, but jostling on a rougher, softer track. The air in the box shifted. Isaiah smelled damp leaves, the sweet rot of forest floor. Something knocked twice on the plank above his head. "Easy now," Wainwright whispered through the boards. "You got a minute to get some real air. 1 at a time. No talking. We off the road, but sound travel. A strip of light widened as a board slid back an inch. Cool night air poured in, rich as gold. Isaiah sucked it greedily, his lungs burning, chest heaving. He turned his head toward the crack, his cheek scraping splinters, and saw a sliver of trees and sky. "Don't move more'n you need," Wainwright said. "We ain't out yet." Another shift, another grunt, and then, faintly, his father's voice. "I'm here." Isaiah swallowed. "Me too," he whispered. For a moment, that was enough. They rode like that for hours, stopping twice more to tighten a strap, to let the horse drink, to angle off the main path onto tracks Isaiah could feel were less used. Each time, the box opened a hair. Each time the taste of free air returned. Each time the crack slammed shut again. Sometime toward morning, exhaustion stole in behind fear. Isaiah's mind floated. Images flickered behind his eyes. Ruth's face, frozen at the river. Mary's hand over her mouth. The flicker of torchlight on Calhoun's porch the week they'd sold old Ben after he'd been caught with a scrap of someone else's newspaper. "Should have branded the alphabet out of him," the overseer had sneered. "Reading, turn 'em troublesome." In the box, Isaiah dreamed without sleeping of letters crawling over his skin like ants, biting, burning. He woke with a start when the wagon jolted hard, his shoulder slamming into the side of the compartment. Outside, a man cursed. The wagon had sunk into something. "We stuck!" Wainwright growled. "Road's a mess," another voice muttered. Not one Isaiah recognized. "You should have took the ridge. I told you the South Trail rot out this time of year. I take the ridge, we ride right past a patrol station." Wainwright snapped back. "You want to explain to them what you doing hauling nothing but air and old sacks this time of morning? We could say nothing! Now shut up and push!" The wagon heaved. Mud sucked at wheels. The sound of straining wood and curse and effort filled the small space. Isaiah's head thudded against the boards. Above him, something ripped. A violent lurch threw him sideways. For a second, the weight above shifted wrong. One of the sacks slid against the floorboard with a sound that was not supposed to happen. "Hold it!" someone barked. The wagon jolted to a stop. "Board's loose," a new voice said. "You feel that? Floor ain't sitting right. You got rot in there." Ice flooded Isaiah's veins. "What you mean?" Wainwright's tone went high, too quick. "Just a squeak. Wagon old. Old wagons don't move like they hiding something," the other man said. There was a sickening pause. Isaiah could almost hear the shape of suspicion thickening in the air above. "Lift it," the man said. Isaiah forgot how to breathe. "Don't be a damned fool," Wainwright hissed. "We on a timetable. You wastin'. Lift it." Each word landed like a hammer. Fingers scrabbled at the edges of the false floor. Nails squealed against wood. The hair on Isaiah's arms prickled, his muscles locked. He knew, suddenly and completely, that this was it. That in the next breath, light would flood in, hands would grab, his father would be dragged out, and whatever lay on the other side of that would not be called life. Stone, he thought wildly. Stone, stone. Then, from somewhere not above him but ahead, came a different sound, closer, urgent. Hoofbeats, fast, a shout. "Riders!" a distant voice yelled. "Company coming!" Wainwright swore. "Patrol!" he spat. "You want to stand here with your thumbs in my floor and their guns up your nose, or you want to get this wagon out the damn ditch." The other man hesitated. A whip cracked. "Fine," he snapped. "But you fix that board for next time. I ain't riding your death trap again." Hands left the edges. Weight shifted. The wagon rocked as bodies heaved against the wheels. With a wet, sucking sound, it lurched free of the rut. Isaiah's heart only started again when the hoofbeats that had sparked the panic faded past. not stopping, headed somewhere else down some other road. He did not know how much more of this he could take, by the time Wainwright finally hauled the wagon off the paths completely, bumping it up what felt like a barely there. Track into thicker woods, Isaiah's body had become one long, dull ache. His legs tingled from lack of blood. His shoulders burned. His mouth felt coated in the taste of fear. "Last stop," Wainwright murmured through the boards. "We walk from here. Ain't no road go where we going now, except the one we make with our feet." The false floor slid open for real this time. Boards lifted enough for air and light and escape. Isaiah squinted as gray morning flooded in. The sky above the ragged tree line was the color of old tin. Mist sat low over the ground, clinging to roots and fallen branches. His father's face appeared above him first, upside down. There was hay in Samuel's hair, dust on his cheeks, and a tightness around his mouth that had not been there the day before. His eyes looked like he'd aged 10 years in a night. He reached down a hand. "Come on," he said softly. Isaiah grabbed his wrist and let himself be hauled up into the new world. The air hit him like a blow, cold, wet, clean. He sucked it in greedily, coughed, then laughed once, a harsh, startled sound. His legs buckled when he tried to stand. Pins and needles stabbed. Samuel caught him under the arms, propping him. "Easy," his father murmured. "Blood got to remember how to go where it belonged." For a moment, they just stood there, leaning into each other, the wagon at their backs, the woods around them. Then Wainwright dropped to the ground with a grunt, dusting his hands. "This where my piece ends," he said. "There's a creek 'bout half a mile yonder. You follow it north till you hit the old burned church. Man, there'll take you the next leg. Don't ask his name. You forget mine soon as I walk away." Samuel nodded, jaw hard. "You got us past what we couldn't pass alone," he said. "I don't forget that." "Forget it," Wainwright snapped. "I ain't no hero. I just got more trouble with sleep than sense." His gaze flicked to Isaiah. "You the boy can read?" Isaiah blinked. "Yes, sir." "Don't call me sir," Wainwright muttered. "You keep that reading quiet till you somewhere it don't get you hung. And when you there," he hesitated, something nodding in his face. "When you there, you remember there's still folks back this side of the line. Your feet getting free don't mean your work done." Isaiah swallowed. "Yes," he said again. This time he did not add the sir. Wainwright shoved his hat back, spat into the leaves, then glanced once more in the direction of the invisible river. "You got family worth more'n I ever seen," he said, almost to himself. "Don't you let what happened on that bank turn to rot in you, boy. Wood warp if you keep it wet." He slapped the horse's flank, climbed back onto the wagon, and turned it in a tight, awkward circle. Without looking back, he snapped the reins and rolled away the way they had come, dwindling into creaks and thuds, and finally, nothing. The woods closed around father and son. For a while, neither of them moved. Isaiah flexed his right hand. The cut there glowed faintly, the skin around it puffed and angry. He lifted it, palm up. Samuel did the same. Their scars matched, dark against dark, little half-moons identical. "Same mark," Isaiah said, his voice thin. "Same blood," Samuel answered. They started walking. The creek Wainwright had mentioned was more a trickle than a stream at first, weaving between stones hidden by ferns. It grew as they followed it, fed by unseen springs. Birds called overhead, their sounds sharp, indifferent. Isaiah stumbled more than once, his body unused to the rhythm of moving under open sky without someone shouting at his back. Samuel steadied him each time with a hand on his elbow, then let go quickly, as if afraid of making him dependent on the touch. "You think they know yet?" Isaiah asked at last, when his breath had settled enough for words. "Back home," Samuel's jaw tightened. "They'll know," he said, "by sun high at the latest." "Ruth!" The name snagged in Isaiah's throat. He forced it out. "What do you think they do to her? To Mama?" Samuel stopped walking. The question had hung between them all night, unasked, raw. Saying it out loud made the forest seem to lean in, listening. He turned to face his son. For a moment he said nothing, just stared at Isaiah, as if trying to see all the way down into whatever future might be curling there. "They'll hurt 'em," he said finally, the words flat. "They'll use 'em. They might sell 'em. They might break 'em in ways you can't see on the skin." Isaiah's stomach clenched. "Then why?" "Because they was gonna do that whether we stayed or not," Samuel cut in, a sharp edge in his voice. "This place been eating us slow since before you born, boy. That river back there, that wasn't the start of the hurt. It was just the first time I got to choose what it cost." Isaiah flinched. "I left my sister," he whispered. Saying it made him feel both smaller and more solid, like confession in those whispered stories about church. Samuel's face changed. Some of the hardness drained, leaving a rawness. "No," he said quietly. "I did." "I didn't fight you," Isaiah shot back, bitterness surprising him with its taste. "I didn't push you away. I didn't jump out that box. I just lay there and let you choose me." "You call that layin'?" Samuel demanded, sudden heat flaring. "You think staying still in that hole was easy? You think what you did wasn't its own kind of courage?" Isaiah opened his mouth, closed it again. "You didn't ask to be the one," Samuel went on, his voice dropping. "I made that choice. Men like Calhoun and them made it with the laws and the chains and the whips 'fore I ever set foot on that riverbank. But that last reach," he took a ragged breath, "that was my hand, not yours. Don't you take my sin and wear it like it belonged to you." The word sin hung there, heavy. Isaiah stared at him. "You think it was a sin?" he asked very quietly. Samuel looked away, up toward the thin slice of sky between the branches. "I think," he swallowed, "I think God put Abraham on a mountain and told him to raise a knife over his boy. And then he sent an angel to catch his arm. I think we got the first part and not the second. That's what I think." Isaiah had heard that story once in the kitchen, half told by the cook's grandson who'd snuck into a white service. He remembered the old man's voice when he'd repeated it later, how he'd laughed without humor. "God always stopped that knife for them in the stories," the old man had said. "Ain't never seen him do it down here." Now in the damp woods, Isaiah found he could not tell whether the wet on his face was from mist or tears. He scrubbed at his eyes with the heel of his left hand. "You could have chosen her," he said. It came out not as an accusation, but as a lost boy's bewilderment. "You said you was gonna. I heard you last night. You told Mama." Samuel's shoulders hunched, as if bracing against a blow. "I spent all yesterday walking that road in my head 1,000 times both ways," he said. "Every hour I chose different. By dusk I done wore holes in every path I could see. In the end..." He looked back at Isaiah, and the rawness there was almost too much to bear. "In the end, my hand moved how it moved, 'cause I saw your future clearer than hers. That's the truth that gon' sit on my chest till I die. Because I can read," Isaiah said dully. "Because you can read," Samuel agreed. "Because you strong enough to walk 3 nights on an empty belly and still do sums in your head. Because a boy with letters in him can maybe do more than swing a hoe for another man. Because this world afraid of a Negro who know how to put sound to symbol. And anything scare a world like this got power in it." He stepped closer, gripping Isaiah's shoulders again. "You think I ain't see Ruth's power?" he demanded. "That girl got fire in her bones. but fire back there gets you burned. Fire up where we going." He shook his head. "Might be it light the way for more than just her." Isaiah searched his father's face. "She think you betrayed her," he said. Samuel's hands dropped. "I know," he breathed. "Can you live with that?" Isaiah asked. A humorless smile cracked Samuel's mouth. "I ain't sure I can live long enough to find out." They started walking again because there was nothing else to do. By noon, the trees thinned. The burned church appeared like the bones of some giant animal picked clean. Its steeple was gone, roof caved in, walls charred. Vines clawed up the blackened wood as if trying to cover the shame. A man waited in its shadow. He was short, thick-shouldered, with skin the color of rusted iron. His hair was threaded with gray, his clothes plain but clean. He stood very still, watching them approach, one hand resting lightly on a walking stick. "You, Calhouns?" he asked without preamble when they were close enough to hear. "Was," Samuel said. The man's gaze flicked over them, taking in their worn shoes, their scars, the way their eyes moved. "You Wainwright's cargo, then," he said. "He said you was comin'. One night late, but alive. That already a blessing." He held out his hand. Samuel hesitated a fraction of a second, then took it. The man's grip was firm, calloused. A farmer's, not a preacher's, though the church loomed behind him. "Name's Elias," he said. "That's all you need to know. We go north from here in pieces. You'll hit 3-4 more stops 'fore you anywhere can breathe easy. You ready?" "No," Isaiah blurted before he could swallow the word. Elias looked at him, a flicker of something like respect crossing his face. "Good," he said. "Fools the only ones say they ready for a road like this." He turned, gesturing toward the charred doorway. "We rest inside a spell. Patrol don't like this place. Superstitious. Some fire 40 years ago took out half they cousins. They think it cursed." "Is it?" Isaiah asked, before he could help himself. Elias glanced back. "Everything on this land got a curse on it one way or another," he said. "Question is which one you carry with you and which one you leave behind." Inside, the air was cooler. Light spilled through holes in the roof, painting the soot in pale streaks. The pews that remained were blackened and warped. A cross, half fallen, leaned against the far wall. Isaiah sank onto a stump where a support beam had once been. His legs shook with fatigue. Samuel lowered himself more slowly, one hand pressed to his side. It was then Isaiah noticed the way his father moved. Not just tired, but guarding something. "You hurt?" he asked sharply. Samuel waved him off. "Just old bones complainin'," he muttered. Elias's eyes narrowed. "Let me see." "Ain't let me see." The older man's tone brooked no argument. Samuel hesitated, then unbuttoned his shirt. A dark stain spread across the undercloth at his left ribs, jagged at the edges. Through the fabric, Isaiah could see the ugly purple of a bruise already blooming, shot through with red. "When that happen?" Elias asked, his voice gone flat. "Wagon hit a ditch," Samuel said. "Board caught me." Isaiah's gut clenched. "Why didn't you say nothing?" Samuel gave him a look. "You couldn't hardly breathe. I ain't about to make you worry about me on top of that." Elias stepped closer, fingers gentle but efficient as he pulled the cloth aside. The bruise was worse than it had looked. A deep, spreading pool of blood beneath the skin, with a small cut at the center, where a splinter had pierced. "Ribs cracked, maybe broke," Elias grunted. "Lucky it ain't gone in further." "Feels like a mule kicked me," Samuel admitted through his teeth. "You walk much more for it knit. It might puncture something you need," Elias said. "Lung, maybe. We can wrap you, slow the bleed, but—" He shook his head. Isaiah felt the ground tilt. How far to? To where we can stop, he asked. Far enough, Elias said. Too far for a man in his shape to go quick. Then we go slow, Isaiah said fiercely. We take as long as we... You take as long as you can, Elias corrected, not unkindly. Road don't always wait on the likes of us. Samuel met Isaiah's eyes. In them, Isaiah saw the calculation going on behind the pain. Miles weighed against heartbeats, risk measured against hope. I walk, Samuel said. I ain't come this far to lay down in some burned-up church. Elias studied him for a long moment, then nodded once. Stubborn, he said. Good. Stubborn men the only ones make it past the first line. But you listen to me when I say this. He glanced between father and son. There may come a point on this road where a choice get made about who goes on and who goes back to the dirt. When it come, you don't stand there arguing with God. You move, else you both get buried. The words landed like stones in Isaiah's chest. He thought of the riverbank, of Ruth's eyes, of his father's hand closing, not around her arm but his. He wondered how many choices one life could hold before it snapped under the strain. They rested until the sun slid a hand's width higher in the sky. Elias bound Samuel's ribs with a strip of cloth torn from an old shirt. His hands practiced. Each breath Samuel took afterward was shallower, but he said nothing. When they stepped back out into the light, the burned church behind them looked exactly the same. The world did not tilt. No thunder cracked. No sign appeared. Isaiah had the sudden, dizzying thought that somewhere, at that same moment, the sun was slanting through the slats of the Calhoun quarters, picking out dust motes over an empty pallet and two occupied ones. That someone was standing in that doorway, shouting, that men were running, that Ruth was being dragged into a yard or a kitchen or a field. The distance between here and there felt like a wound. Come on, Elias said. North, don't get closer, while we staring at old ghosts. They walked. The days that followed blurred into a pattern of motion and hiding. They traveled by night when they could, through thickets and shallow streams, across fields at a crouch. By day they crammed into spaces barely bigger than the wagon box, under floorboards of sympathetic barns in root cellars that smelled of turnips and damp, in the hollow beneath a fallen tree. At each stop, different hands fed them. A Quaker woman with pale hair who pressed a crust of bread into Isaiah's palm and murmured, God be with thee, child. A leathery black man in a tobacco shed who grunted, Ain't nothing up there you can't find here, 'cept they don't own your hide. A quiet, mixed-race couple who said nothing at all, just opened a hidden panel and pointed. Each had their own reasons. None asked for thanks. Samuel's breath grew shallower. He hid it well at first, cracking jokes in whispers, asking Isaiah to repeat the names of every bird call they heard, just to see if he knew. But at night, when he thought Isaiah slept, his murmured groans leaked into the dark. On the 5th day, in a narrow gully where pine trees crowded the rim and the air smelled of sap, his legs buckled. Isaiah lunged, catching him under the arms. Papa! Samuel wheezed, the sound thin. Sweat slicked his face, despite the chill. His hand went automatically to his side, clutching at the ribs Elias had bound. I'm all right, he gasped. Just give me a breath. But when Isaiah helped him to a rock and he sagged onto it, his skin felt wrong under Isaiah's grip. Too hot, too slick. When he coughed, a fleck of something dark stained his lip. Fear knifed through Isaiah. He thought of Elias's warning. He thought of all the stories whispered in the quarters about runaways found dead under trees, their mouths full of blood and dirt, their ghosts still walking the woods. No, he said, more to the world than to his father. No, we ain't come this far for... Samuel's hand snapped up, gripping his wrist hard. "Look at me," he rasped. Isaiah did. "I told your mama I'd take the worst of it," Samuel said. "I meant it. I ain't asking you to like it. I'm asking you to use it." Tears burned behind Isaiah's eyes. "Use what? You're dying." Dying, my living, all of it," Samuel said. His voice shook, but there was iron under it still. "You think I hauled you into that box just so you could be another man swinging a hoe with free papers in his pocket? You got Ruth's fire and Mary's backbone and my stubborn in you. That's a lot for one skinny frame to carry, boy. Don't you dare lay it down." Isaiah swallowed hard. "I can go back," he choked. "I can. You step 1 foot back toward that place, and I haunt you myself," Samuel snapped, a flash of his old fierceness. "Ain't no chain they put on me stronger than the one I'd see on you if you turned around now." He coughed again. This time, a thin line of red slid from the corner of his mouth. "Papa." Isaiah's voice broke. Samuel's grip on his wrist tightened, then loosened a fraction. "You remember what I told you in that box?" he asked. "You live. You live so hard my death got meaning. You remember that?" Isaiah nodded, unable to speak. "I meant it," Samuel said. "I don't know what you gon' be up there. A stable boy, a clerk, a man with his own hammer and no white hand on it. Maybe more. Maybe you stand somewhere one day and say our names out loud and nobody can stop you. Ruth, Mary, Samuel, Isaiah. Calhoun's fields ain't the only earth they ever touched." He lifted his marked right hand with effort, until it trembled inches from Isaiah's. "Give me your hand," he said. Isaiah pressed his own palm against his father's, scar to scar. "Say it," Samuel whispered. "Say what?" "Your name." Isaiah swallowed. "Isaiah Samuel Calhoun," he began out of habit, the surname sour in his mouth. Samuel's fingers dug into his. "Not his name," he growled. "Yours." Isaiah's mind went blank. He had never thought of another one. Back on the plantation, names had been things given and taken at will. Old Ben had once been Moses on another place. Sarah had been Sally, had been girl. White men's last names stuck to them like brands. "Who was your granddaddy?" Samuel asked, a fevered urgency in his gaze. "Your mama's side. Before they sold him. Before he got took." Isaiah closed his eyes. He saw flashes of stories told in whispers. A man with a scar down his jaw, who had sung in a language no one else understood. A name half remembered from some far coast. A rhythm night song sometimes fell into when the older folks thought nobody listened. "Kwame," he whispered, the syllables strange and familiar at once. Mama's granddaddy was Kwame. Samuel's breath hitched in something like a laugh. "Then that's what you take," he said. "Isaiah Kwame. You carry him with you. You got both them worlds in you then. Book name and blood name. Let the white man's name fall off you like dead skin." Isaiah tasted it. "Isaiah Kwame." "It don't change nothing," he said, but something in his chest shifted all the same. "It change you," Samuel said, "and you change things. Little at first, maybe. One man at a time. But you do it. You owe me that much." His voice wavered, thinned. His fingers slackened on Isaiah's. "Papa." Panic surged. Samuel's eyes fluttered. For a moment they unfocused, then found Isaiah's face again. "Tell her," he whispered. "Tell Ruth. I ain't choose against her. I choose for you, for all of us. Tell her if you find her. Tell her." His chest shuddered. Isaiah leaned in, desperate, as if he could press his ear to his father's lips and catch each fading word like a dropped coin. "Tell her I saw her standing in a world where she ain't afraid no more." Samuel murmured, each syllable a struggle. I just ain't got legs left to walk that far." A sob tore loose from Isaiah's throat. "Don't go," he choked. "Please, Papa, please." Samuel's right hand, the one with the small blood-scarred crescent, slid up, clumsy, and brushed Isaiah's cheek. "Boy," he breathed. It was a word and a blessing and a farewell all at once. Then his hand fell. The forest did not go silent. Birds still called. Wind still worried the branches. Somewhere far off, water moved over stone. The world, indifferent, rolled on. But in that small gully, time split. Isaiah clutched at his father's shirt, fingers bunching the sweat-damp fabric, half expecting the chest beneath to rise again. It did not. For a long time, he did not move. Tears came and went in waves until his face felt rubbed raw and his throat scraped. Grief sat on him like another body, heavy and unmoving. When at last he could pull his hands back, his fingers left dark smears on Samuel's ribs where the cloth had soaked through. The skin beneath was cooling. Isaiah sat back on his heels. The boy that had left the Calhoun plantation with his father's hand on his shoulder felt very far away. In his place, in the space carved out by pain, something else was forming, slower, harder. He looked at Samuel's right hand. The small crescent cut on the palm was darker now, the skin around it wrinkled. Isaiah reached out and, with a care that hurt, pressed his own palm to it one last time. "I'll live," he whispered. His voice shook, but the words held. "I'll live so hard your death got meaning. I swear it. On this mark, on your name, on Ruth's." The promise settled in his bones like a brand. He did not have tools or time for a proper grave. Patrols still threaded these woods. Elias's warning rang in his ears. "You don't stand there arguing with God. You move." But he would not leave Samuel like meat in a ditch. With hands that felt too big and too clumsy, he scraped at the earth beside the rock where his father had fallen. The dirt was stubborn, full of roots and stones. His fingers bled, his nails split. He kept going. When the hole was deep enough that Samuel's body would not show from the path, he dragged him in, muscles screaming. He straightened the limbs, smoothing the shirt as if getting him ready for Sunday service. "There ain't no preacher," he said hoarsely. "Ain't no choir, ain't no marker but me. But I see you, Papa. I see you." He gathered stones and piled them, one by one, over the spot. Not enough to look like a grave from a distance, just enough to keep the wind from stripping the soil, the animals from digging. When he found a flat one, he scratched at it with another rock until his raw fingers carved clumsy letters. S-A-M. He stopped. S-A-M was a white man's shortening. Samuel had been a Bible name first, but Calhoun had made it his property label too. Isaiah gritted his teeth and scratched under it, slow, each line a struggle. K-W-A-M-E. It was ugly, crooked. It was real. He laid the stone at the head of the mound. When he straightened at last, the gully seemed to have grown taller. The trees loomed, his back ached, his hands burned. For a moment, he wanted nothing more than to lie down on the mound and let the dirt take him too. Then he thought of Ruth, of her right hand hanging at her side, of the mark they all shared, of Mary's voice saying, "You hold him. I'll hold her." If he lay down now, no one held anything. He picked up the small Bible from where it had fallen when Samuel slumped. The cover was scuffed, the pages bent. He opened it at random. His eye fell on a verse he only half remembered from whispered kitchen preachings. A line about the sins of the fathers visited upon the children, and another, further down, about mercy to 1,000 generations of those who loved God. He did not know which one applied to him. "I ain't sure who you are," he said aloud, voice rough, lifting his face a little to the strip of sky. "Or if you listening. But if you are, you owed him an angel on that riverbank. You ain't send it. So you listen to him now, anywhere he is. You treat him better than this land did. Silence answered. He closed the book and slipped it into his shirt, against his heart. Then he did the hardest thing he had ever done. He turned his back on the grave. Each step away felt like tearing something. He forced his feet to move. At the rim of the gully, he stopped once and looked back. The mound of rough stones barely showed between the ferns. If someone passed along the deer path above, they might never see it. He would see it in his mind every day. Isaiah Kwame, he said softly, as if introducing himself to the world and to the man under the stones at the same time. Son of Samuel, grandson of a man you stole, brother of Ruth. The titles sat on his tongue, bitter and sweet. He faced north. The trees did not part. No road unfurled, but somewhere beyond them, there were towns where a black boy might stand and no one could legally lay a hand on him. Somewhere beyond them, there were people who'd risk their own peace to pass along a message, a story, a name. He had his father's mark on his hand, his blood under his nails, his new name in his mouth, and a promise in his chest. He began to walk.